College Football Playoff Committee does exactly what we were discussing and what we expected them to do, which is confuse everyone for yet another week. I wonder what nickname the consensus would vote on for the committee based on the Week 3 rankings, the third unveiling of the College Football Playoff.
Barrett Sallee described it aptly at OutKick.com as clear as mud. That's what the playoff rankings are right now, is who's going to be in.
So 2 weeks ago, it was Alabama and LSU. Felt like a playoff game. Last week, Tennessee and Georgia. For Georgia, it was hyped up as a playoff game. Had to win it. This week, Ohio State, Indiana. Here are the rankings, the top 25 for Week 13. So as you go through this, you see that, well, the top 5 includes Indiana. So you have number 2 versus number 5 this week. Notre Dame continues to hold on strong at 6. Alabama, they're up with Miami at number 8. Ole Miss, way undervalued to me. Plus Georgia, way undervalued. And Tennessee at 11. There were several people, Chad, that I was watching social media, they thought Tennessee would be in college football playoff. But as you start to look at the bracket, no, they're the first team out. And that has caused a lot of debate. And it is debate season. They love that with the playoff. They want it to be subjective. They want it to add some controversy. And here it is this week. Some solid first-round matchups. But the best teams, there's no way. And Texas continues to be overhyped at number 2, given the fact that, well, when you look at their schedule, their best win is Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I don't want to let what I've been accused of online, a lot of my SEC bias take hold here when I discuss this. But if you just look at the top teams in the ranking, and let's go back to the rankings if we can, guys, not the bracket, but the rankings.
Yep.
You cannot, with a straight face, try to convince me that 4 of the top 5 teams in America are from the Big Ten. And on the flip side of that, I'm having a hard time believing Texas is the best SEC team. They just happen to be the SEC team with only 1 loss.
1 loss.
And there's a logjam of teams with 2 losses. And I get that that's going to be difficult for the playoff committee to sort through all that. That's their job, is to properly sort through 2-loss teams, 1-loss teams. But when I see Penn State, who hasn't beaten anyone that high, when I see Notre Dame, who has that nice win to open the season at A&M, but that's it on their resume, as high as they are. Indiana's a great story. They're undefeated. Awesome. But when I see them that high, having not played anyone yet this year and beating Michigan by 5 points, I have a hard time believing that we're not just getting back to the point of let's just count losses. And then we'll sift through. When it comes to the major conference teams, we're going to count losses. We've seen they're willing to penalize at BYU when they get their first loss, when it's at home to Kansas, as far as they dropped. But I take issue with that. And I think it's all going to work itself out in the end. I felt that throughout. But that's the problem I'm having with some of these decisions, is I think it's just simple arithmetic of how many games have you lost when we're talking about Big Ten and SEC teams.
Well, so consider, though, our conversation yesterday. They are ranking these teams in groups of 3 as they go through the first 4 pods of this bracket. So when you look at the top 25, it's Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas is who they deem the best teams. That's what they're asked to do. Not the most deserving, but the best. So they're looking at a group of 6 teams from the consensus top 30 that they turn in. And by the way, the voting is anonymous with this. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas is how they've stacked this. Now, then you add 3 more teams to the pod, and they come up with Penn State, Indiana, Notre Dame ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss. So just based on how this is stacked, Georgia was in the 3rd group of discussion, which when you look at their resume, and we looked at the process of which they go through, I don't know how you end up where they did this week. But I will say, I think they end up where a lot of people would have certain teams by the end of all of this. Because Ohio State or Indiana is going to lose. We know that. And we're going to have SEC teams, as long as they're not no upsets, continue to climb based on the results of the weekly competition. I mean, they're even mentioning Mercer. Yeah, Mercer's name was dropped last night for Alabama.
Yeah, we saw what they did against Mercer this weekend. Look, Georgia is a good case study in all of this. I don't know a single person that watches football that thinks Penn State, Indiana, or Notre Dame would beat Georgia if they played neutral field.
Yeah, exactly.
Hell, if they played that game at home right now, I would take Georgia to win that game. Now, I'm also not going to sit here and say, well, what Vegas says is what goes. I don't believe that either. And sure, there is some bias here involved with a team like Georgia and Alabama, and Ohio State for that matter, because we see where they rank in recruiting rankings nationally year after year after year.
And
we know how many future pros they have.
Yep.
We know what they do in the NFL draft. So naturally, we're going to view those teams through a different lens than we would, say, an Indiana. But Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, hell, even Tennessee, I just think are better football teams than some of these Big Ten / Notre Dame teams that we're talking about when you really look at them head-to-head, roster to roster, and then start to truly analyze who they've played and what they've done throughout the course of the season. I just think it's becoming too easy to just say, well, they have one loss and they have two, so that one-loss team's ahead of them.
I don't know if it's just based on...
Throw Texas in that mix, too, by the way, against those two-loss SEC teams.
Well, Texas is going to have to prove it whenever they face A&M. And on top of all of this, Chad, is the fact that I think right now it's more about the hype game and the controversy that they want to stir up. Because the one ranking that matters is the one where they make up the rules that night or that morning on December the 8th. And that's the one where it actually comes to the consensus of who's the best teams. You know, who do we want in this group of 12? And some of it's about the agreements that have been made with, the Notre Dame, with certain, conference champions that will get the bye. But they won't be able to overlook Georgia if everything holds. And it's been a crazy season. There's no doubt Georgia isn't the same Georgia of 2 years ago. But the 18-point loss against Ole Miss is not helping Ole Miss here as much as I would expect it to with their victory.
Well, it's helping them be one spot ahead of Georgia.
And
Georgia's win at home over Tennessee is helping them be one spot ahead of Tennessee in the rankings too.
But
Tennessee's win over Alabama didn't help them at all because they both have two losses and Alabama's four spots higher than Tennessee.
How about Georgia's win over Texas?
Right. And but they neatly ordered it. Ole Miss beat Georgia. Georgia beat Tennessee 9-10-11, 2 losses. Yet Tennessee wins head-to-head with Alabama. They're 4 spots ahead. And there's maybe no perfect way to do this.
There's not.
Looking at Georgia, we want to talk about, okay, who are your losses too? They don't have a single bad loss. They lost at Ole Miss, and they lost at Alabama. They've won at Texas, and they beat Tennessee at home. Those are their 2 key wins. But it's not like either one of those losses are crimes for them.
No, it's not. It's a 7-point loss at Bama.
Now, I'm surprised the way they looked at Ole Miss. To your point,
me too.
Ole Miss completely controlled that game on the defensive line. So that did surprise me, but going to Ole Miss and losing is no crime.
But they're propping up Texas for the analytical aspects. They're looking at their run game and doing. They're mentioning all these things. Ole Miss is a top 25 offense and defense right now. So with all the metrics that are going into it, and they don't have to consider certain things. They can if they want to. Again, it's subjective. This will all play itself out with Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee didn't fall as far as Georgia did.
No.
So they're in a good spot. I mean, they just need to control what they can control now, just like every other SEC team there. I still think they're only getting 4 in. That's just based on the way that the SEC, the Big Ten, put this together. I just think that both conferences get 4. But that doesn't mean that Tennessee can't be one of the 4.
And I still think it's going to work its way out where there's not going to be this overwhelming bit of controversy with the SEC come Selection Day.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, when we think nothing big's going to happen, it always happens.
Something does.
Auburn's going to beat Texas A&M, or Florida's going to beat Ole Miss, or Alabama's going to lay an egg at Oklahoma, or A&M's going to go in and beat Texas and give them a second loss after having lost to Auburn, or Tennessee's going to lose to Vandy and knock themselves out of it.
Or a quarterback gets hurt.
Teams are going to start eliminating themselves. Or Minnesota's going to beat Penn State, and we're going to come back a week from now and say, how does Penn State with 2 losses stack up against all these 2-loss SEC teams? The answer is they don't, and they shouldn't be anywhere near the top 12 at that point. So something's going to happen. Notre Dame's still got to play Army and go to USC. Something could very well happen there. I'm not going to get too worked up about any of this right now, but I will say
it's been a parody
to
of college
fans
football.
everywhere, I understand the frustration if you are one of those fan bases that are frustrated today.
We saw this. Now, just compare it to our elite top 12 that we posted earlier this week at OutKick. And just Oregon and Texas, representatives from the Big Ten and the SEC. Miami from the ACC. Colorado, our consensus with the elite top 12 from the Big 12. Ohio State, Indiana, they sit strong right in the middle of things. Alabama, Georgia, Penn State's lower, and I agree with that. Notre Dame, Ole Miss, and Boise State round out the top 12.
And we also have Alabama, Georgia. Alabama right at 7 where they are in the other ranking, but Georgia higher
One
than
spot.
Ole Miss.
Yep.
Yeah, and the other one has Ole Miss
So-
1 spot ahead of Georgia.
So I mentioned, things can change, and you're right about the upsets, and craziness will certainly happen. How about the crazy idea from Joey Galloway, who was on fire last night?
I thought he was outstanding.
Yeah, he
was bringing up a lot of great points when they were unveiling the rankings, and he was being contrarian and the antagonist to everyone and kind of cutting people off left and right, which bothered some. But I thought he was bringing up a lot of good points until he got to this one.
And he's comparing this to a situation that happened last year with Jordan Travis.
They can't go any higher.
They are behind a one-loss
They have
team.
a chance to go on the road and prove what they are. Now, honestly, if we believe in what our metrics are saying, if I'm Indiana, I don't know if I'm playing Rourke against Ohio State. We've seen what happened to Florida State last year, Jordan Travis. What could keep Indiana out of this? Getting their quarterback hurt. We've seen it happen to Florida State last year, having not played anybody.
Or losing by 30
if you look at 3, 4, and 5, Texas, Penn State, and Indiana, they literally have played nobody between all 3 teams. The toughest team in that is Vandy. So a lot of this that we're looking at is eye test, because Boog, when you look at the resumes of 3, 4, and 5, it brings back the idea of, let me not play anybody and be undefeated.
Yeah.
And be in a good position.
I agree with
because
that,
the
yeah.
eye test is going to matter, because 3, 4, 5 have played nobody, and that includes Indiana.
It includes a lot of teams. If you're just going to stack it with bad losses.
Yeah,
a
little bit of context there, because I was actually watching this live. I do want to fill in the blanks here. He starts by, they have that playoff calculator thing, and they have the ability to go in. It's like election night when they're going to different counties. They can say, all right, what if they win this game and lose this one? Or let's look ahead 2 weeks, and if they win both, what are the percentages? And it shows immediately the uptick or the downtick in percentage chance of making it. What they did was, let's look at Ohio State, Indiana this week. The ESPN predictor has them at 97% right now, and then Joey Galloway clicked lost to Ohio State, and it said 96%. So his point was, and I don't agree with them doing this or that they should, but he's saying, well, if that's the case, the only thing that can knock you out is if your quarterback's not healthy, a la Jordan Travis in Florida State a year ago. When he got hurt in a game against North Alabama, they were going to win anyways in November. So if it's just going to drop 1 percentage point, rest your quarterback, keep him healthy.
Make sure you're in.
Beat the hell out of Purdue the last week and you're in. That's the point he was trying to make. Now, you can't legitimately, when you're playing for a conference championship, that's not the message any coach wants to send throughout his roster is, hey, we're probably going to lose this game anyway, so let's sit our quarterback against Ohio State. So that part of it I understand. But he was trying to make a point about what the committee told everyone a year ago with Jordan Travis and Florida State.
Yeah, and they'll do something similar this year. There will be something that they make up as they go, but that will be the perception. The reality is they're doing it under the parameters that was set up in large part, mostly by the Big Ten and the SEC. They brokered this with ESPN. They've extended the contract for television. They're moving to 16 teams. It's going just as they've planned it out. The hype is real. People are pissed off every week, and it's a different fan base every week that feels like they've been slighted. Give it another week. Will it be Alabama next week if they don't perform well but win a tight game against Oklahoma? Will they be trying to set up the Iron Bowl as another playoff game for Alabama? Maybe it's Texas and Texas A&M. Who knows?
Well, every game now for those two
I know,
SEC
but I'm
teams
saying like
is a playoff game.
I'm saying where they're ranked, like close proximity.
They're gonna be out. I mean, I think the thought is with those two-loss SEC teams that they're going to eliminate themselves at some point. Someone's going to have a bad day and lose and be gone.
Well, the loss would happen at the SEC championship,
and then the SEC championship, and then that gets into tricky. That's where I think there's some impropriety that's going to be at play, because if Greg Sankey and ESPN wanted to flex their muscle, they would make that game basically immune to the loser being out of the playoff if they were in it going in. That's what Greg Sankey wants, because he wants the SEC championship game to not be something that Lane Kiffin's talking about it being, something that teams don't want to be there and get punished by missing out on a chance to go to the playoff, while the teams that aren't there and sitting home with 2 losses get in.
Well, they do want to magnify that game, though, because if you win, you get a bye. And that's the whole premise of how this is set up in their formula. But if you can believe this, Lane Kiffin, who's never won an SEC title as a head coach, at Ole Miss, where he finally got over the hump and got a big win against Georgia that is hurting Georgia right now with where they're ranked in the top 12. Lane Kiffin stood at a podium and said exactly what the other coaches are thinking and have told him, but won't say publicly.
You know, it's changed. The conference championship, could have a big impact both ways for people. So I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that, they don't want to be in it. And, the risk to get a bye, the reward to get a bye versus the risk to get knocked out completely. I mean, that's a really big risk, just to get a bye. So I think it's ended up being a very unique situation of all, postseason sports, the way that system's set up there, and how you could go to that and get knocked out, and if you don't go, you're in.
Questions?
I'm not a big gambler, but that's the kind of one of them Vegas, like poker table thing. Like, that's all in. And you're going all in. And you're going all in the best conference in football. So you got to play somebody great too. Very different than a lot of these other conferences.
And that's what makes the SEC championship so
shot at the other conferences too.
Oh yeah, but what he just said is why you want to win the SEC title if you're a coach in the conference in football, because it's the best. You're on top of the SEC during the regular season. That is a gauntlet. Even the easier schedules are difficult compared to the crap we're seeing in the Big Ten right now, because they don't have divisions with all the hundreds of teams that they've added.
They've got 18 as opposed to 16 in the SEC.
But so, and we just heard an SEC coach say, you know what, I'd rather not play in the SEC championship game because it could hurt us. That has to end. I don't think that is. This setup is not able to get to a point where, Chad, it's going to have a remedy until they move to 16 teams. And the 2 teams that make the SEC title or the Big Ten championship game are automatically in. You get the automatic qualifier just by making that game, and you get the bye if you win it. That's how that's the remedy to it, but it's not going to happen for another year and a half. So we're left with a team that's going to lose that game, and that will be a part of their resume. It has to be. There's nothing that says that the committee can't use it, because there's no written rule against the recency bias, like there is for the NCAA tournament, for instance, where you're supposed to look at the consensus instead of just what happened recently. Point being, they've floated out there that it's not going to hurt. I mean, how can it help you in any way, in any argument in that room, if you look like crap against one of the top teams in your conference?
If it's not Texas in that game with only 1 loss to get to 2, as the loser and a 2-loss team gets a 3rd loss,
Yeah,
it's got to knock them out.
I would think so.
I mean, it's got, and again, I'm not saying that that's the way it should be or should play out. Here's what I'm saying. They're telling us that the amount of losses is the most important. That is the most important because Indiana hasn't beaten a soul. Penn State hasn't beaten a soul. Notre Dame's beaten 1 soul on the road, and that was Texas A&M, an SEC team. Good win. So if that's what matters most, then a 3rd loss knocks you out. Mm-hmm. It's plain and simple to me. And that sucks for the team that goes to the SEC championship. Let's say they play a close game and lose by 7. They're going to be out. But I get a little bit uncomfortable when all this petitioning starts 3 weeks out. By Lane Kiffin, by Greg Sankey, by others. Well, we're going to hear more of that as we gear up for the SEC championship game.
This isn't catching anyone off guard, by the way. This has been the setup since they unveiled their path to the college football playoff expansion. So, and Sankey can't act like, we got for the the good of the game, for everything to just be transparent. We're not going to consider the loser. I don't know how you consider the loser when the winner gets a bye. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Of course you consider who's losing that game.
Well, what happened to Georgia a year ago when they lost the SEC championship game? They were undefeated.
Yep.
And they lose 1 game at the end of the year, and they're out all of a sudden. Seemed pretty harsh at the time. But, I mean, I just don't think that – I love Greg Sankey trying to do what he can for his conference and Lane Kiffin and everyone else. The loser of this game can't treat it like it's an exhibition. And that's what they want. Oh, great, you won. Congrats, coach. You get to go get the bye and be SEC champion. But it didn't count for the team who lost. We just happened to be the unlucky souls who got in because of the tiebreaker on the 7th try of the tiebreaker system, got in to play you. So that loss doesn't count, guys. We should be right where we were before. It just doesn't work that way.
And you
can't have the best of all worlds with that.
And you don't want to be the first one to test the loss in that game and risk not getting in the college football playoff.
Again, I just think that is one of the elimination scenarios I'm talking about with those 2-loss SEC teams. Yep. If it's a 2-loss team that gets loss number 3, they're out. That's the way I think it should play out that way based on what the committee's already told us. And if it's 1 loss Texas and it's their 2nd loss, then I'm willing to have that discussion at that point. But then Texas's lack of just gigantic wins, they would have one in that scenario at A&M, which would really help them. But that has to come in play also. So a lot of football left to be played. It's going to work itself out, but it leads to some great conversation right now.
Maybe Colorado's a part of all of this when it's all said and done. Will Deion be the head coach at Colorado next year? Rumors already swirling about him in Dallas. You got Michael Irvin who says, hey, it's a done deal if Jerry Jones will draft Shedeur Sanders, that Deion will go coach the Dallas Cowboys. I'll believe it when I see it because there's only room for one star in Dallas, and his name's Jerry Jones. But Deion says his kickstand is down, that he's happy where he is. Well, he could be happier somewhere else. He didn't mention that he's the happiest at Colorado. That's another big swing that we can certainly look to. But Dallas is in this spot, Chad, because they're one of the teams involved in the year of suck. And they would have to get pretty high and trade away a group of players, future picks, and find out what to do with Dak Prescott's contract in order to do anything that's being mentioned right now as a hypothetical. More difficult to pull off than a fantasy trade.
I thought it was a weird choice of words that my kickstand is down. So I'm thinking, well, you can just very easily kick that kickstand back up and go.
You could, yeah.
You're not really anchored in. This is not – you don't have the foundation, the moorings of your house are not in Boulder, Colorado. A kickstand was the choice of word to use, which I'm like, well, you can kick that kickstand up pretty easily.
Is it a motorcycle? Is it a bike? Is it a?
And if they decide to draft Shedeur Sanders, I'm with Michael Irvin. Then it's 100% going to happen. That's their plan. Is they're going to hire Deion after they fire Mike McCarthy.
Oh, that'll be known
if that's the plan going forward. Yeah. So it is the year of suck, Hutton. You brought it up. I started to go through every team with 3 or fewer wins currently in the NFL. These are the 9 teams that are the masters of suck so far in the NFL. And, boy, there's some bad football to go around.
Death marches on.
Right. But, just because you suck one year doesn't mean you're going to suck forever, or doesn't mean that you're going to be bad next year. I present to you the Washington Commanders, who sucked a year ago. They got the second overall pick. They drafted Jaden Daniels, and now they're good. They look like they're a playoff team. The Denver Broncos got a lot better. You can get better year to year, rookie quarterback, even a returning quarterback, by making the right moves in free agency, drafting well, all those things. So it got me thinking, Hutton, about a hopeless ranking. And the way I did this was I evaluated the 9 teams with 3 or fewer losses, the worst teams in NFL, and I ranked them based on hopelessness. So number 9 on my list has the most hope of this group, while number 1 on the list is the most hopeless franchise in the NFL. Factors I included: projected salary cap space going into 2025, quarterback situation, average age, and certainly I'm thinking about ownership and the contract situation, the quarterback, all those things factored in as well. Shall we get to these rankings?
Absolutely.
Hutton? Let's do it.
I love this.
All right, let's go.
The death march of the NFL.
Let's go to number 9, shall we? The New England Patriots. The New England Patriots are currently sitting at 3-8, Hutton. But here's what I love about the Patriots. They have $139 million in cap space. They got a rookie quarterback who's improving on a rookie contract in Drake May. Average age of their team, 26.8 years. They got a good owner in Robert Kraft. They got a first-year head coach in Gerard Mayo, who seems to be pushing some of the right buttons with this team. Some questionable decisions, no doubt, but seems to be pushing some of the right buttons. For that reason, they are the least hopeless of this group.
Yeah, and they know who their quarterback is. It starts right there. It doesn't end there, but with the money that they have, keep in mind, Calvin Ridley decided to go to the Titans over the Patriots this past offseason. I bet he reconsiders that, given the quarterback spot and what Drake May has looked like. He is spinning it. He's not winning games yet, but that dude looks legit. There's a lot of promise there, and I think you've adequately put them at the right spot at the first team to leave the group of suck.
The most hope of a mostly hopeless bunch. Number 8 on my list, the Las Vegas Raiders, sitting at 2-8 currently. The Raiders have $106 million. This is, I think, second on my list in terms of available cap space next year. They know what they have at quarterback. Nothing. They got Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, and both those guys aren't really going to be around. They're not a long-term solution. So you know they're likely drafting quarterback very high in the draft. Could be Shedeur Sanders. Could be another top quarterback. Average age of the team, 26.3 years. I don't love ownership here. Antonio Pierce is not going to be the coach. I think next year they'll be starting over with a new coach. But the fact that they're second best on the list shows how bad of a list this is with some current situations.
I think their next coach is either Deion Sanders or Mike Vrabel. And Shedeur Sanders is their next quarterback, throwing to the best tight end in the NFL in Brock Bowers next year. They have a lot of promise. I'm with you, though. Right now, there's not a very clear outlook. But Brady's there, and one of his good friends is Mike Vrabel. Keep an eye out on that.
Number 7 on the list, Dallas Cowboys right now. Having a little bit of hope, and I'll say for this reason. They got Dak Prescott. That looks bad. Dak Prescott is not terrible. The contract situation is not great for the Cowboys with all of that dead cap money that he could have on him in that organization. Dead cap of $151 million.
Well, just signed him a few months ago.
Right, $151 million. By the way, $89 million cap hit playing next year. They got $25 million in available cap space, not a lot. Average age of the team, 26.6. So they're not far removed from 3 12-5 seasons. That's what I can't really come to grips with this team. So again, I think it's a really bad situation in Dallas, especially this year. And I don't know that it's getting a lot better, Hutton, but they're here. That shows how bad we're about to get on this list.
They're not far removed from a 12-5 season or back-to-back-to-back seasons. Jerry Jones seems further away from that, though. I could rate them higher on your list just based on the craziness that always goes on with Dallas and the fact that there doesn't seem to be light at the end of the tunnel, given the fact I don't know who's coaching this team, who's coaching Dak Prescott. And, if it's Michael Irvin, he's saying that Shedeur's going to be there. So Dak Prescott's not going to be coached.
Well, if you like craziness, Hutton, and that would be a crazy situation, and certainly Jerry Jones at Dallas, an insane situation right now. You want more insanity? Let's go to the New York Jets. Next on my list at number 6 in my hopeless ratings. They have a 3-7 record right now. They got Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers appears to be done.
Yep.
We said that before about Tom Brady late in his New England tenure. That wasn't the case. I don't think he's going to be back as the Jets quarterback for sure. So they've got $31 million in available cap space. It's not a huge hit in dead money for Aaron Rodgers if he's gone after this year. Average age of the roster, 27.8. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about the Jets and all this young talent. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and
Sauce Gardner.
Go down the list. They got some players on that team. They now need a quarterback again. Ownership is not a good situation with Woody Johnson, who's shown that he can be pretty emotional. And now there's an ESPN report that he wanted Aaron Rodgers benched back in September.
In week 4.
In week 4, wanted him out. So that's not a good situation, but they're dead smack in the middle right now, Hutton, of the hopeless rankings.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for them. The flip side of it, devil's advocate, they get a chance to get it right with personnel. But the problem is they were pushing the fact that they had the best roster they'd ever seen coming into the season. They then fire Robert Saleh instead of benching Aaron Rodgers, and then end up firing Joe Douglas, who put together the roster that Robert Saleh was coaching. Again, it's madness. Maybe the saving grace is Woody Johnson's going to be an ambassador again to the UK.
So the next team on my list has kind of the opposite problem of the Jets, and they play in the same stadium.
Oh, okay.
The New York Giants come in at number 5. They are too steadily bad, if that makes sense. They're too committed to stability, even when all signs are this is not good. They don't want to fire the GM. They don't want to fire the coach. Brian Daboll's probably going to be back. I can understand that decision. They stick with Daniel Jones far too long, in my opinion. They're going to go to Tommy DeVito now. There's not a ton to like. They got $45 million in cap space, but with the returning infrastructure of leadership, I don't feel great about them doing the right things with that money. They got a pretty young team, 26.3 years. They got a good ownership situation. But Hutton, this is a team that's just too steadily bad.
Yep.
And that's why I rank them just a little bit below the Jets and even more hopeless than them.
The one
like at least the Jets will take swings.
The morsel,
I guess is my point.
The morsel for the Giants that gives me hope is the fact that they tried to trade up to draft Drake May. They tried. Couldn't do it because New England was going to stick and pick. Also, with the Giants, at least they get a new quarterback. That's all I can say. Like we
know that's going to happen.
Yeah, they can rush the passer. That's about all they do.
Well, and we're going to get into the territory now of 3 of the 4 teams could likely be a quarterback in flux situation.
Okay. Right.
With one, that's not the case. So let's get to the 4 most hopeless NFL organizations currently. Coming in at number 4, a team that plays less than a mile from this studio right here, the Tennessee Titans.
I thought this would be number 1.
The Tennessee Titans, Hutton, I thought about it, are 2-8 on the season. The Titans have $72 million in cap space. That's good. They did a terrible job with all the money they had this past offseason. Average age, 25.9. That's bad. Quarterback situation, not good.
No.
Will Levis, a second-round pick in year number 2. They got to go draft a quarterback or find a stopgap option. Their coach is Brian Callahan in year 1. I don't think he's done anything to get fired yet, but how great do you feel about that situation if you're a Titans fan? If you're being honest with yourself, not great, but he's likely to come back. Hutton, the word that I kept coming back to define the Titans organization currently is rudderless. From ownership down, Rand Carthon is GM, Brian Callahan is the head coach, Amy Adams Strunk is the owner. It's a rudderless ship. There's very little leadership, and the people who should be leaders of that organization are not doing a good job. For that reason, they're one of the 4 most hopeless organizations in the league.
I'm with you. The name of that ship is just a question mark. On the side of the ship. And the saving grace is they have the name of their new stadium coming to town in 2027. That's the only thing to look forward to currently.
Yeah, they're not as flamboyantly awful as the next 2 teams on this list. Let's go to number 3, the worst city in the NFL, Jacksonville, and one of the worst organizations in the NFL, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags, 2-9 currently, played one extra game over the Titans, so they're dead last in that division in the AFC South. Hutton, they got a quarterback that they're paying a ton of money to, and I'm not sure that he's worth it. It's also a situation where you're not going to cut bait with Trevor Lawrence either. So that's a bad spot to be in. I've ranked them worse than the Titans because of that. It's not like they can go draft a guy or go find a different option and be in a better spot at quarterback. They got $58 million available in cap space this offseason as of right now. Bad situation in Jacksonville.
They aren't that far removed, though, from being a competitive team. They're not right now.
Their roster's not bad.
That's not bad. That's their saving grace. There you go. There's the positive spin on it. Their roster's not bad, but their record is. Good luck.
And Doug Peterson, the head coach.
Sayonara.
Yep. They'll have a new head coach next year, which, hey, could go find your Dan Campbell, and you're just fine if you're Jacksonville with some talent. Bill Belichick's being mentioned in Dallas, too. I've seen a few reports. So he's keeping his name in the news on that Manning cast. He likes to talk now all of a sudden, which I love. Number 2, second most hopeless franchise in the NFL currently, and I would say second also on the list of being the most flamboyantly bad with their ownership, David Tepper and the Carolina Panthers at number 2.
I thought this might be number 1.
They got a quarterback who's coming back in Bryce Young on a rookie deal still. 3-7 on the season, Hutton. Carolina, they got a little bit of money in cap room, $37 million. They've got some nice young players, but it's one of those where what is ownership going to do day to day? Does anyone even want to be there? Bryce Young, does he still want to be there after being benched and brought back? Dave Canales is in year 1. I kind of put Dave Canales and Brian Callahan in the same spot. I don't think they've done anything to get fired in year 1, but they haven't done a lot to inspire a lot of confidence from anyone.
Both owners will do whatever they want.
They're both young, very young guys to be head coaches in the league. Both offensive guys. I don't like much about Carolina.
The positive thing about the Carolina Panthers is a lot of people are going to be watching them this week. They play Kansas City.
That's good. They're going to have a lot of eyeballs on that suck this week. That's always a good thing. The number 1 most hopeless franchise in the NFL, Tyler Castle, cover your eyes and ears. It is Tyler's Cleveland Browns. Boy, oh boy, did Deshaun Watson screw over this organization. The Browns willfully handed him that money and that guaranteed contract, but he has done nothing to earn that money in his time in Cleveland. And his teammates talk about how hard he works and shows up every day. That's great. It's not going to put wins on the scoreboard for Cleveland. The Browns are negative $44 million right now in cap space because of that Deshaun Watson contract, largely. That's what they're looking at. They got to clear guys in this. This is going to start a complete rebuild. Who's rebuilding things? With Jimmy Haslam and his ownership. Who do you trust? Is it Kevin Stefanski in year 6 right now? Don't know that he's going to be back. That albatross of Deshaun Watson, $172 million in dead cap with him. Boy, oh boy, I don't think it's that close. This is an awful situation moving forward. For a Browns team that should be better right now because of that defense, it's awful.
Carson Beck is one poor bastard because he's going to end up in Cleveland. But the good news is I don't think Deshaun Watson will be there. I think they're just going to pay him to leave, get it over with, draft someone young, draft a rookie, someone cheap, and build around another quarterback that will soon be another butt of the joke for the jersey.
I just don't think...
Congratulations, Cleveland.
I don't think it's very hard for me to just even see a glimpse of a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not trying to be fatalistic in all of this, but if a Browns fan comes to me and says, what do you like about the future of the Browns?
They need...
I don't know.
This is easy
I think Cleveland's economy is better.
They need their Joe Burrow.
I guess I could say that.
They need like the hometown guy to come in and just take over the way Burrow did with Cincy.
They might need a new owner, too. That's what sucks about some of these situations is you can't force somebody to sell the team. And there are probably 4 or 5 on this list that are perpetually in a state of flux or bad.
Well, Jimmy's bringing them a new stadium.
That probably need new ownership. Well, that's great. Jimmy needs to bring them some wins. That's what he needs to bring them.
Jameis going to eat them.
Yeah.
Get after
Jameis can eat those W's.
Coming up,
And they're going
by the
to
way,
lose. They're going to lose
Chad,
Mike Vrabel too this offseason.
That's right.
So,
Analyst.
top consultant
Mike
for special teams, Mike Vrabel, will be a head coach somewhere.
Vrabel
Another
is
loss.
a special teams consultant made me laugh. When I saw
Another
that.
L for the Browns, losing Mike Vrabel.
Well done, Chad.
Thank you.
The 9 teams of suck in the
The
National
9 most
Football
hopeless
League.
teams in the NFL.